Ms. Maria Soledad Sistenas Reyes, for promoting the rights of persons with disabilities. Dear friends, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities requires states parties to take all possible measures to ensure the protection and safety of persons with disabilities, including the protection of their access to the highest attainable standards of health. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development pledges to, quote, leave no one behind, unquote. It is critical to ensure, in this regard, the full and equal participation of persons with disabilities in all spheres of society and create enabling environments for them in line with the vision contained in the CRPD and the 2030 Agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic is the most severe disruption the world has faced in recent memory. While persons with disabilities share the same primary needs as everyone else, empirical evidence suggests that they have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, as they are at a greater risk of developing more severe health conditions resulting from COVID-19. Moreover, the barriers to healthcare have been further exacerbated during the COVID-19 crisis, making timely and appropriate care difficult for persons with disabilities. An integrated approach is therefore required to ensure that persons with disabilities are not left behind in our response and recovery efforts. In this regard, I would like to propose the following. First, universal accessibility for persons with disabilities is a central pillar and bridge for the exercise of their human rights. It is therefore imperative to mainstream disability in all development plans and efforts. Second, to fully implement universal accessibility, we must move broadly towards the eradication of multidimensional poverty in accordance with SDG 17. In this regard, the Third International Conference on Financing for Development duly recognized the importance of financing for disability-relevant services and support for developing countries, which should be provided on a priority basis. Third, as President of ECOSOC, I have proposed greater fiscal space for developing countries, larger investment in sustainable infrastructure, and adoption of new technologies to recover from the COVID crisis and achieve the 2030 Agenda. For example, the development of smart cities with technological innovations can truly facilitate universal accessibility. In this regard, consideration should be given to the creation of an infrastructure project preparation and investment facility in a private-public partnership associated with or under the umbrella of the United Nations. Such a body could assist developing countries in preparing viable and bankable infrastructure projects, including development of smart cities, which would facilitate universal accessibility for persons with disabilities. Fourth, in the context of the global pandemic, all services related to the COVID-19 crisis, including remote, telephone medical advice, quarantine facilities, public information, including information on essential supplies and services, should be accessible for persons with disabilities on an equal basis and provided on accessible platforms in various alternative formats, modes, and methods of communication. Ladies and gentlemen, the high-level political forum of the ECOSOC next year will be an appropriate time to focus on accessibility, especially on healthcare and the exercise of other related rights by persons with disabilities. It would be an opportunity to discuss modalities for financing for disability-relevant services, particularly in developing countries, which will be critical for making universal accessibility a reality. Most importantly, I hope that the high-level political forum will adopt a COVID-19 response and recovery strategy which is inclusive, accessible, and capable of reaching the furthest behind first, especially people with disabilities. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your words. We welcome for opening remarks, to His Excellency Ambassador Cristian Espinosa from the Permanent Mission of from the Permanent Mission of Ecuador to the UN. The floor for you, Ambassador.
Thank you, and greetings to all. It's a pleasure to see friends on the screen and see people who care about the subject a lot. It's an honor to participate in this important event, which Ecuador has the privilege of co-sponsoring in order to address the campaign of universal accessibility, a pillar and bridge for human rights and sustainable development, as part of the 13th session of the Conference of the States Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I want to thank the co-sponsors of this event, Ambassador Munir Akram of Pakistan, President of the ECOSOC, Ambassador Milenko Skopnik, Ambassador from Chile, and of course, in particular, Maria Soledad Cisterna Reyes, Special Envoy of the Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, for her efforts of the realization of this panel. I also want to thank UCLG, Emilia Saiz, a friend with whom I have worked for many years in the past. So I'm glad to see her here too. Dear friends, the 13th session of the Conference of the State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities opened this morning in the midst of a global circumstance that demands our collective effort. With millions of COVID-19 cases worldwide, economies and health systems have been put to the test. Above all, the pandemic has highlighted the vulnerability of certain groups, particularly persons with disabilities, who suffer disproportionately from economic hardship and health-related problems. In my country, Ecuador, the crisis caused by the pandemic has required an interinstitutional articulation towards the implementation of a public policy on disabilities, accompanied by multiple efforts to protect persons with disabilities and their families, especially focus on prevention, respect of their rights, and comprehensive access to healthcare during the emergency. We must work for the inclusion and access of persons with disabilities to health services on an equal basis with others, as well as the critical information that is available in the accessible formats. Likewise, the active participation of persons with disabilities and their representative organization in all stages of the response and recovery from COVID-19 are imperative, so that persons with disabilities are at the center of our efforts. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Human Mobility of Ecuador, Ambassador Luis Gallegos, expressed this morning at the opening of the COSP, every crisis can become an opportunity. It is up to all of us to ensure that the world emerges from this pandemic as a more just place, free from discrimination and violence. This historic moment can be translated into enormous support to jointly solve social problems, to build back better, and to promote with greater emphasis on the rights with persons with disabilities. Dear friends, Ecuador chairs the 13th Conference of the State Parties, which offers an opportunity for state parties and all stakeholders to reflect on experiences and the lessons learned during the pandemic, identify gaps to strengthen policies, and to improve our practices in fully implementing the convention. This parallel event constitutes one of these opportunities to implement the convention. The Conference of State Parties has been steadily growing and has become one of the largest and most important global forums on disability issues. As the international community is taking actions to build back better after the current crisis and achieve the 2030 agenda, our deliberations and contributions at the Conference of the States Parties become more relevant and important. We must amplify our efforts to fully implement the convention while pursuing sustainable development for our people in line with the SDGs. Taking into account all these new developments, the Bureau of the Conference decided to choose as our overarching theme of the 13th session the following: a decade of action and dedication for inclusive sustainable development, implementation of the CRPD, and the 2030 agenda for all persons with disabilities. This theme will be addressed during a whole week dedicated to persons with disabilities, from November 30th to December 4th, with many activities at the UN that will include 3 virtual roundtables and a series of side events like the one we are in which we are participating right now. Furthermore, as part of the official program and to commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, we will have an interactive dialogue with the UN system and other stakeholders. In this segment, we will have an opportunity to hear about the initiatives that are being undertaken to support member states for implementing the CRPD and advancing accessibility and disability inclusive development. Dear friends, today's side event reinforces the work we have been carrying out to implement the CRPD. And it addresses a most relevant subject. Universal accessibility remains an imperative for state parties, the UN system, and civil society at large towards the effective protection and promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. Improving accessibility, strengthening inclusion, solidarity, and equality must remain our priority. And it is our firm commitment to build a society free of discrimination and without the barriers that limit the enjoyment of human rights, in particular persons with disabilities. We are convinced that together we will achieve these objectives to benefit 1 billion persons with disabilities who rightfully claim that nothing about us without us. We must continue working, and I'm delighted to see that today we are working at different levels of governments, taking into account the participation of local governments in the coordination of the meeting. Finally, I have to apologize because I might have to leave earlier the meeting. I've been informed right now that I have to go back to the UN building because we will have a second round in the elections of officers of the for the convention, and this has to be announced from the webcast system of the UN. But I will carry on as much as I can in the meeting. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your intervention at the opening remarks. Well, with great joy, we await this moment, that of the presentation of the campaign, Universal Accessibility, Pillar and Bridge for Human Rights and Sustainable Development. Please, Special Envoy María Soledad Cisternas Reyes, the floor is yours.
Paula. Muchas gracias, embajadora. Gracias, embajadora Espinosa, por sus palabras, porque hacen un marco muy propicio para este evento paralelo. Además, las palabras iniciales que hoy día escuchamos en la sesión de apertura son muy auspiciosas para seguir impulsando el tema de la accesibilidad. El embajador Akram nos ha hecho el anuncio importante de cómo va a promover el tema de accesibilidad el próximo año en el foro político de alto nivel. Y quiero recordar que en el High Level Segment de este año, en cuanto tocó participar como enviada especial, señalé que la accesibilidad era eje medular para el cumplimiento de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. También en las palabras del embajador Espinosa, en recuerdo al embajador Gallegos, entender que esta crisis es una oportunidad, pero ha sido muy grato ver cómo todas las autoridades del sistema van en la misma línea, en la línea de los derechos de las personas con discapacidad y su desarrollo sostenible. Y por otro lado, en eje por la accesibilidad. Sabemos que la década de acción nos dice promuevan ideas para alcanzar soluciones. Y en ese sentido, cuando vemos un hilo conductor de las distintas falencias en el acceso a la salud y al ejercicio de derechos en la pandemia y durante las cuarentenas, es precisamente la falta e insuficiencia de la accesibilidad universal. Si ustedes observan, cada aspecto está vinculado con la falta de accesibilidad. Una accesibilidad universal, porque no es solo para las personas con discapacidad, sino para muchas otras personas. Por ejemplo, las personas mayores. Por ejemplo, la madre que va con su bebé en un coche o en brazos, para la persona que tiene temporalmente algún accidente que afecta a su oído, a su vista, alguna de sus extremidades, etc. Vale decir, la accesibilidad es para todos. Como decía en la mañana, ganar en dignidad y derechos para todos. Por otro lado, ¿por qué esta campaña es denominada Pilar y Puente? Porque precisamente en la relación de universalidad, indivisibilidad e interdependencia de los derechos humanos, el siglo XXI nos entrega una figura transversal que cruza el ejercicio de los derechos civiles, políticos, económicos, sociales y culturales de las personas con discapacidad y de otros sectores de la población, y ese hilo conductor común es precisamente la accesibilidad universal. Por eso es un pilar, pero también un puente. Y un puente para el desarrollo sostenible, porque también hay una interrelación, ya que el desarrollo sostenible se basa en los derechos humanos, pero también los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible interactúan entre ellos. Debemos observar que la accesibilidad universal liga diversos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Para no extenderme en demasía, voy a enunciar solo dos. En primer lugar, erradicación de la pobreza. Sabemos que muchas personas con discapacidad, muchas personas mayores viven en situación de pobreza que es totalmente agravada por la falta de accesibilidad, produciendo aún mayor marginalidad. Y esto es incrementado por la pandemia. Entonces, debemos tener en consideración que la pobreza multidimensional está también estrechamente relacionada con la falta de accesibilidad. Por lo mismo, superar esa pobreza es lograr mayor accesibilidad. Y otro de ese, podría nombrar muchos más, pero otro de ese, el 17, cuando se nos habla de revitalizar la alianza para el desarrollo sostenible. Y sin duda, el elemento común que abre sus compuertas hacia el desarrollo sostenible para millones de personas en el mundo es precisamente la accesibilidad universal, por lo que ya he comentado, a todo el ejercicio de derechos humanos, libertades fundamentales y todo el cumplimiento de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Es por eso que en línea con la política del secretario general que se dio este año, uno de cuyos pilares es la accesibilidad, y también en línea con la resolución de la Asamblea General sobre desarrollo inclusivo y accesible para todos y todas, es que diseñamos esta campaña, y voy a pedirle en primer lugar a Paula Arroyave que efectúe audiodescripción del afiche de la campaña.
Okay, we will wait for the image, the poster, please. Okay, here's the poster. The poster represents a city in motion. This city is accessed through a bridge, where boys and girls cross with their teacher to get to know this accessible city. The interactions that occur at the city are the following. An older person goes up to the city hall through an elevator. In the city hall, a person is received at the information desk with sign language. A young man connects from his home through the city hall website. A young girl, wheelchair user, enters the museum through an accessible door. A person with visual disability is going to cross the street listening to the indications at the traffic light. A mother with her son in a baby car and her daughter in her arms access the bus by a ramp. The city's posters can be read in Braille, and they are easy to read too. The public restrooms are accessible. That's the end of the description.
Muchas gracias, Paula. Bueno, ahora vamos a exhibir el video que tiene por objeto, por supuesto, promover la accesibilidad universal, que sea un elemento educativo que pueda ser utilizado en distintas instancias, tanto en educación superior, pero también en educación media y educación básica, para la toma de conciencia, el awareness raising desde la infancia. Entonces hemos tenido mucho cuidado en ver los distintos tipos de discapacidades, balance de género, balance de razas, etcétera, etcétera, que es lo que ahora ustedes van a poder apreciar, y quiero señalarles que ustedes pueden bajarlo, en la página de la enviada especial está, y en otras páginas también, para que puedan difundirlo gratuitamente en los distintos países y ser utilizado por todos y todas. Aquí viene video.
Accessibility, Pillar and Bridge, for the exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, United Nations. Persons with disabilities represent around 15% of the world's population, which is equivalent to more than 1 billion persons, who face several barriers to their full and effective inclusion in society. Persons with disabilities have the right to be autonomous, to live independently, and to be included in the community. Therefore, we must promote universal accessibility as a human right, so that our cities are inclusive, safe, resilient, progressing towards sustainable development, leaving no one behind. 2030 Agenda, United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, number 11. To improve accessibility in both urban and rural areas, we must apply principles, guidelines, and standards on universal design in all facilities and services open to the public or for public use, including the removal of obstacles and barriers. Implement or improve accessibility in physical spaces, such as buildings, public roads, transportation, schools, housing, hospitals or medical facilities, workplaces, stadiums, cultural centers, recreation and sports, among others. Promote access to information and communication services, including those needed in situations of emergency. Promote access and use for persons with disabilities to new information and communication technologies and systems, including the Internet. Buildings and other facilities must include accessible signage. Different forms of personalized assistance, such as guides, readers, and professional sign language interpreters, should be offered to facilitate accessibility to buildings and other facilities open to the public. Provide training, including training in universal design and accessibility to all public and private institutions that provide services to the public as well as to the community. We all must be aware that we live in diverse, dynamic, and interactive societies, and that the commitment of governments, including local governments and municipalities, is essential to ensure that accessibility is a fundamental pillar in all cities, creating a bridge so that all persons can enjoy all their human rights and fundamental freedoms. Let's promote accessibility as a commitment for society as a whole. Produced by the Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, María Soledad Cisternas Reyes. Year 2020.
Thank you very much, Special Envoy, for your presentation, for this initiative, and for this amazing video and poster too. Sure, it's gonna be a marvelous material that all of you can share. We continue with Ms. Amalia Gamio Rios. She will present the central aspects of the document called Universal Accessibility as a Standard in Human Rights and Sustainable Development, prepared by the Special Envoy as the substantive content of the campaign. Ms. Amalia, please, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias. Agradezco a la enviada especial del Secretario General sobre Discapacidad y Accesibilidad, María Soledad Cisternas, por la oportunidad de comentar este importante documento. Excelencias, señoras y señores, este documento presentado muy oportunamente en esta también destacada 13ª reunión de los Estados parte de la Convención, destaca que establecer la accesibilidad como parte de los principios generales de la Convención sobre los derechos de las personas con discapacidad e introducir el concepto en la Agenda 2030 y en otros instrumentos, lo elevó a rango de estándar normativo vinculante. Ubicar a la accesibilidad como un estándar jurídico específico sirve como puente para el ejercicio de derechos humanos y libertades fundamentales para todos, niños, jóvenes, adultos mayores, madres, personas con discapacidad transitoria o permanente, toda la diversidad urbana. En zonas rurales y urbanas, en exteriores e interiores, en edificios públicos y privados, en el transporte y las zonas verdes, en las escuelas, los hospitales, en las comunicaciones, incluyendo las tecnologías de la información. Señoras y señores, el concepto de diseño universal en el que se basa la accesibilidad es ahora reconocido como una llave que permite la inclusión y la sostenibilidad, que marcan la conexión directa con la accesibilidad universal. Esta se ve reflejada a través de nociones como ciudades amigables, ciudad saludable, ciudad inteligente y sostenible y ciudad amiga de la infancia, referidos en diversos instrumentos. En torno a la carencia de accesibilidad, se está creando ya jurisprudencia en diversos países del mundo, lo cual visibilizará aún más las violaciones al derecho por parte de los estados o de particulares. Se cita al artículo 9 de la Convención, el cual instruye a los estados partes a adoptar medidas pertinentes para asegurar la accesibilidad de las personas con discapacidad en igualdad de condiciones con las demás, con el propósito de que puedan vivir en forma independiente y participar plenamente en todos los aspectos de la vida. Detalla que las barreras deben eliminarse de modo continuo y sistemático, en forma gradual pero constante. También señala el deber de dotar al público de señalización en braille y en formatos de fácil lectura y comprensión, ofreciendo formas de asistencia humana o animal, lectores e intérpretes profesionales de lengua de señas, entre otros. Se alude a la observación general número 2 sobre el artículo 9 de la Convención, que sostiene que la accesibilidad es una condición previa para que las personas con discapacidad disfruten de forma efectiva de diversos derechos civiles, políticos, sociales, económicos y culturales. Para ello, los estados partes están obligados a aprobar y promulgar normas nacionales de accesibilidad y a supervisarlas. Señoras y señores, la enviada especial destaca lo enfático que es la importancia de la elaboración y aplicación de leyes y normativas en estrecha consulta con las personas con discapacidad y que la accesibilidad debe incorporarse también en las leyes específicas sobre igualdad de oportunidades y participación en el contexto de la prohibición de la discriminación por motivo de discapacidad. La capacitación continua e inclusiva de la población en las nuevas tecnologías de la comunicación es un desafío vital en la actualidad, no dejando espacio a una brecha digital que sería excluyente. Los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible de la Agenda 2030, con su lema "No dejar a nadie atrás", se entrecruzan perfectamente con la Convención. Al menos 12 de los objetivos se relacionan directa o indirectamente con la accesibilidad y en general con las personas con discapacidad. Se destaca el objetivo número 11, el cual especifica que las ciudades y los asentamientos humanos deben ser inclusivos, seguros, resilientes y sostenibles, prestando especial atención a las necesidades de las personas en situación de vulnerabilidad, mujeres, niños, personas con discapacidad y personas mayores. La meta 17.19 abre la posibilidad a establecer indicadores sobre accesibilidad, ya que este estándar está directamente vinculado al desarrollo sostenible. Se plantea que en el ámbito del monitoreo internacional del desarrollo sostenible, el examen de los países en el Foro Político de Alto Nivel de Naciones Unidas deberá profundizar en el eje clave de la diversidad humana, cumpliendo estándares de accesibilidad universal. Y ya escuchamos al embajador que apoyará muchísimo esto. La referencia a los principios rectores de Naciones Unidas sobre empresas y derechos humanos resalta que las empresas privadas no podrán afectar condiciones de accesibilidad existentes, que los bienes y servicios producidos por estas deben ser totalmente accesibles. Esta relación es acorde con la Convención por su vínculo con la libertad de expresión, ya que promueve que las entidades privadas que prestan servicios al público, incluso mediante Internet, proporcionen información y servicios en formatos accesibles. Referirse a la pandemia era inevitable, ya que evidenció que la Convención no había sido implementada ni de lejos de manera adecuada. Se mostró lo distante que estamos de contar con políticas públicas, legislaciones y servicios para ser realmente inclusivos. La brecha digital para la educación a distancia, para la comunicación de las personas sordas, para la información a los adultos mayores, lo que afectó negativamente los derechos humanos de millones de personas en el mundo. Pero también representa, como ya lo dijeron en la inauguración de esta COS y hace unos momentos los embajadores, una oportunidad para hacer las cosas mejor en crisis y sin ella. Finalizo. Aplaudimos con entusiasmo la elaboración de este documento, de toda la campaña, ya que cumplir con los estándares de accesibilidad universal en los distintos ámbitos del entorno humano será la base para poder hablar con seriedad de desarrollo sostenible. Muchísimas gracias.
Paula, can you put your audio again? It's
I'm sorry. I'll do it again. Thank you very much, Ms. Amalia, for your presentation. And dear all, now we will have the segment to hear the comments. Please, Mrs. Emilia Saez, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paula. Thank you, Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear Maria Soledad. It is a true pleasure for us to join you here today in this special UN Conference of States Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. United Cities and Local Governments, the organization I represent, gathers over 250,000 local and regional governments around the world. And we are committed as World Organization to promote universal access, very much in the trend that the campaign is showing to us as a pillar, but also as a bridge to sustainable development. Believe me, this will not be an easy task. And you are absolutely right, Amalia. We haven't done it well yet. We haven't walked the talk. And I think this side event and the special efforts that Maria Soledad is making is pointing us in the right direction. And so has this terrible pandemic that we're going through. It has shown us that we have been accepting inequality for a very long time. And this is no longer an option, because the situation of those most vulnerable among us is the determining factor for the quality of life in our society as a whole. Guaranteeing universal access is not only for those that have limited possibilities, that have disabilities, but it's important for everyone. If you add persons with disabilities to older persons around the world in this urban era, we are thinking of 2 billion persons around the world that are having difficulties enjoying the cities as we know them, making use of our public service provision. Urbanization, our urban era, provides opportunities for social inclusion, for equitable access to services, for better livelihoods, for engaging, mobilizing, triggering creativity, a world of opportunity. But it can also be a very unfair space. We need to make sure that we promote change and that cities make the effort to use all the tools and the expertise that our generation has to make a true change. We will need to change a lot. And the mindset is one of the most important things we will need to change. It will need to affect our physical infrastructure, but also the non-physical infrastructure. We will need to start understanding disability much better. We will need to ensure that all the vulnerable groups are included in planning, that specific indicators are used in the design of our cities, of our territories, that there is true interagency coordination, that we have a common understanding of accessibility and universal design, that we train the trainers, that our public servants know what they need to do, what they need to face, who they need to help. We need to ensure that the next generation is a much more inclusive generation that actually can make use of the talents of all. And this is why United Cities and local governments is delighted to join this initiative, to join this campaign, and to make sure it reaches the big and the small, towns, cities, villages in the world. We are also delighted to continue working with not only cities, but also associations, national governments, and other stakeholders like World Enable. We are certain that together we will make a difference, and we are delighted, Maria Soledad, to continue supporting this effort. Please call on us to do things better. We will be accountable to you and to everybody, to leave no one but also no place behind. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, but above all, to continue working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words, Mrs. Emilia. Now we continue with the comments of Mr. Cid Torcuato.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Yo voy a hablar español y saludo a todos y agradezco mucho a la invitación a participar de este importante evento. Y bueno, yo quisiera para empezar saludar y parabenizar a María Soledad Cisneros Reyes por la campaña enseñada aquí, muy linda y espero muy eficaz en sus objetivos. Y bueno, yo de São Paulo, de Brasil, traigo muy buenas noticias a ustedes. Ayer nuestro alcalde aquí de São Paulo, Bruno Covas, fue reelecto. Entonces, nuestra gestión tiene cuatro años más para continuar implementando los objetivos sostenibles y todo lo que estamos haciendo para las personas con discapacidad, para accesibilidad en nuestra ciudad. Es una de las más importantes partes de nuestro plan de acción, ¿no? Trabajar por los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. Y eso yo muy rápidamente voy a enseñar dos ejemplos de cómo estamos implementando las cuestiones de accesibilidad universal en una de las ciudades más grandes del mundo. Un camino muy importante es el camino de las normativas, de las normas. Entonces estamos trabajando con ABNT, que es la Asociación Brasileña de Normas Técnicas, creando una norma para accesibilidad digital y otra para accesibilidad o diseño universal. Eso todavía no tenemos y es muy importante para completar nuestra legislación, que la verdad es muy avanzada y todo ese desarrollo se dio en los últimos 10 años. Incluso paralelamente a nuestra relación con ABNT, ¿no? De normas técnicas, tenemos proyectos y acciones muy importantes con otras asociaciones y otras asociaciones de distintas áreas. Una de las más importantes para asegurar la accesibilidad es nuestro trabajo conjunto con CAU, que es el Centro de Arquitectos de Brasil, que es no me ocurre el nombre aquí, perdón. Estamos con ellos también hablando con todas las universidades y todas las facultades que enseñan arquitectura para elevar el padrón de accesibilidad en todas las edificaciones de la ciudad de São Paulo. Y para terminar, yo quisiera darles dos ejemplos de cómo nosotros aquí en São Paulo estamos trabajando para garantizar la accesibilidad universal en nuestros servicios. Uno de ellos es que todos los 62 websites de la gestión son certificados y son plenamente digitalmente accesibles. Eso me parece algo inédito. Yo no conozco otra ciudad del mundo que tiene todos sus websites plenamente accesibles. Y para completar, creamos también el CAC, que es la CAC, que es la Central de Accesibilidad Comunicacional. Hoy nuestra secretaría provee a toda la gestión municipal, a todos los eventos, a todos los videos, o sea, todo lo que pasa públicamente en nuestra gestión, recursos de accesibilidad comunicacional, o sea, lengua de señales o traducción, closed caption y audio descripción de todos nuestros eventos. Estos son solamente dos singelos ejemplos de todo lo que estamos haciendo para garantizar los derechos de todos, incluso de las personas con discapacidad en São Paulo. Y yo nuevamente muy contento porque eso vamos a hacerlo eso está garantizado por 4 años más. Entonces vamos a tener muchas acciones y proyectos a intercambiar con ustedes en los próximos años. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sid, for your intervention. And now is the turn of Dr. Victor Pineda. Please, the floor is yours, Victor.
Thank you very much, Paula. I mean, today's event really is another milestone. The leadership that the special envoy has shown once again shows us and inspires us to really take the commitments that we've made and put them into action. Continuous learning, continuous understanding, continuous partnerships being forged. Emilia Sais laid out, again, such a great commitment on her part as a Secretary General to ensure that 250,000 cities, municipalities, local governments have access to this conversation. And these principles can engage in developing communities of practice. Sid was one of the founding members as well as Emilia, as well as Maria, at the launch of our collective global compact on inclusive accessible cities that took the UNCRPD and looked at how it overlapped with the Sustainable Development Goals, and even looked at how that overlap plays out specifically for local governments, and how we can really win the local implementation of the inclusion targets of the SDGs. I mean, ultimately, this is a multi-generational struggle. I remember with Maria Soledad, when we were negotiating the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and celebrating 14 years ago when the General Assembly, with Resolution 61-106, adopted the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities 12 years after its ratification. We now have a lot to celebrate. Number one, just this year during COVID, we've seen an intensification of both risks and vulnerabilities that were endemic and put us into a position of vulnerability, but also new resiliency, new ways to adapt. I think that what I'm trying to say is that each one of our organizations, each one of our governments, each one of our communities has a role to play in looking at this specific campaign on universal accessibility and moving it forward. I'll leave you with two things. Number one, I'm delighted that the ambassador from Pakistan addressed the issue of smart cities, because both Sid and I have been talking about this for many years, as has Emilia, that it creates a risk but also opportunities. The G20 Smart City Alliance that Emilia also helped launch with the World Economic Forum and other partners, UN Habitat, as well as World Enabled, set out accessibility as a foundational principle in the global future development of smart cities. Another major advancement that happened this year was the realization that 60 to 70% of the infrastructure that we will need by 2050 has not been built yet. So how do we put accessibility and universal design into the procurement policies that and the financing mechanisms that will ensure that future infrastructure is inclusive, accessible to all? And then ultimately, how do we continue to build capacity? So in just 2 days, we'll be launching with UCLG and many other partners, and with Maria Soledad, a very first preliminary set of learning modules. There'll be 3 learning modules, an introduction that would allow people to understand those basic concepts of what are disability rights and how do they play out in non-discrimination, how do they play out in accessibility, how do we start the conversations so that we can take ownership and do the work better. So thank you all. I want to invite you to the Conference of States Parties event on December 3rd to join us and all of our partners, including World Blind Union and others, where we'll be launching a lot of tools to move these principles into action. Can move on this decade of action in an inclusive and accessible way with our city partners by our side. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Dr. Pineda. Thank you, really. And please, Mr. Haynes, we are ready to listen for your comments.
Thank you, Paula. So my name is Hannes Julin Lagelius, and I represent the World Blind Union, a global organization representing an estimated 253 million persons who are blind and partially sighted globally. We're also founding member of the International Disability Alliance. First, I'd like to take the opportunity to greet you everyone, excellencies, delegates, co-organizers, partners, and all friends tuning in for this event today. And I'd first like to acknowledge the great leadership shown by the Special Envoy, Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes, for this great initiative, really putting a focus on accessibility as cross-cutting when it comes to realize the 2030 agenda. It goes without saying that we are running out of time to meet the targets of the SDGs and to fulfill the commitments of leaving no one behind. While recalling that we have witnessed great achievements since the adoption of the CRPD a few years ago, crisis, and most notably the COVID-19 pandemic, has been a wake-up call to the world that we have not done enough to address persisting and emerging accessibility barriers facing persons with disabilities in their daily lives. Accessibility is truly foundational in building back better together post-pandemic towards more inclusive and equitable societies in line with the CRPD principles. And by its universality, it gives us the bridge between human rights and sustainable development at the core also of the campaign launched today. It is high time for us all, including member states, local and regional governments, UN bodies, multilateral organizations, and all different types of development actors, the private sector, and organization of persons with disabilities, along other civil society organizations, to jointly take collective steps moving forward and being part of the change moving forward. By being part of the change, that means not only reiterating, as many do, that accessibility is critical. And now it's really time to take action on delivering on accessibility. Organizations of any kind, at any level, has to put accessibility at the center of their operations, avoiding that accessibility and disability inclusion are only becoming afterthoughts. The time to act is truly now, and organizations must decide on how to deliver accessibility across their systems, practices, and programs. Ultimately, the approach organizations take to this will truly determine if their envisioned outcomes and impact are leaving no one behind. The World Blind Union, together with CBM Global Disability Inclusion, are like to play our part in moving from rhetoric to action. With our recently launched first of its kind resource called Accessibility Go, a guide to action, we aim to support any types of organization, be it government, UN agency, company, or civil society organization at any level, with practical guidance on how to take a whole of organization approach to accessibility and practice it holistically. It promotes the equality of all persons with disabilities and centers around 7 core accessibility commitments, coming along very practical self-assessment templates, but also key resources, a list of key resources and definitions, while recognizing that while using the guide and creating accessibility, perhaps with a focus on persons with disabilities, as was earlier reiterated by the previous speakers, creating an accessible environment, space, service, you name it, will benefit all of mankind in all stages of life. Recognizing the immense scope of accessibility and that organizational contexts are very different, we know that the guide itself is not a blueprint, but it's a framework for practical actions. And as the guide is jointly produced and informed by organizations of persons with disabilities and accessibility professionals, it fully aligns with the CRPD. And we see it as a powerful tool which can be used and adapted to any organizations. We believe that the guide also will support organizations of persons with disability to really enjoy their expert roles in their own right, in also supporting and partnering with other mainstream organizations to make accessibility for all a reality. By making use of this guide and the approach recommended, organizations can increasingly be equipped to meet their legal obligations, increase how they become more economical and more environmentally friendly to do no harm, foster inclusion, and contribute towards more sustainable, inclusive, and accessible communities for all. And we specifically like to share our great appreciation with the Special Envoy for your invaluable contribution to make this guide a reality and for providing the guide with a strong forward. Finally, the World Blind Union is fully committed to support and take part in the brilliant campaign launched by the Special Envoy. And we also hope that you will find use of the Accessibility Go, a guide to action to make change happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes, for your words. We have reached the closing of the event, and we have asked His Excellency Ambassador Milenko Skognik from the Permanent Mission of Chile to the UN to deliver us his closing remarks. We are glad to hear you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Paula. And please, the first thing I need to do, and I want to do, is to express our deep gratitude and congratulations to everyone who has been part of the launching of this campaign in universal accessibility, and also the preparation and coordination of this side event. I think there has been a fantastic hour and 15 minutes that we have been listening to many participants, panelists who do such a fantastic work around the world. So I think it's a great opportunity. So Maria Soledad, thank you once again. I know that I can see that you are in a springtime in Santiago. Here is a terrible day here in New York, ugly, dark, and you have a fantastic sun there. We all envy you. But to my colleagues of Pakistan, Munir Akram, and from Ecuador, Cristian Espinosa, to the United Cities and local governments, to UNDESA, to the World Enabled, to the Global Network on Disability, Inclusive and Accessible Urban Development, and to the World Blind Union. Thank you so much for all the work, for co-sponsoring this session. We know very well that since the creation and entering into force of the convention, much progress has been done, but also we know very well that a lot needs to still be done. And I think this pandemic and what has happened around the world with COVID-19 has shown us the need to keep working and keep doing more. Of course, each country is advancing on the measures that they can take. I think the creation in 2010 in Chile or the SENADIS, the National Disability Service, was a very important element. They have provided with a lot of investigation, research, and in order to know better what is the situation of people with disability in our country, and I suppose that has been done in every country. So we have a better understanding, but of course, now we need to take action. And on taking action, also, we have created in Chile a national intersectoral working group on disability and COVID-19, because we need to promote coordinated and collaborative work in order to take action and planning public policies when the needs of people with disabilities are showing. And also not only the people, but also the family, their caregivers, the provider of so much help that they need. So I think that has been an important network that we have been created. And an example of that we need to do more is that we have prepared some documents in order to disseminate what needs to be done in this time of pandemic. We have created a booklet called "In this COVID-19 Pandemic, I Have My Rights," which contain material on patient rights and what to do if they have the symptoms to facilitate. And also this group was a recommendation and good practices in mental health in residence of people with disabilities. So we are very confident that this campaign that you have prepared, that you have launched today with the video, with the explanation of that little poster that is so cute, but also so relevant for many people, will promote awareness to the universal accessibility as an important factor in the fulfillment of human rights and sustainable development in this century. I think with our experience in mind and with the experience and best practice that you can bring to the table, we can improve our efforts substantially to implement the rights of persons with disability all over the world. Well, I can see that Christian is coming back after probably reading some things in front of the UN General Assembly. We couldn't follow, we were following this. But once again, Paula, Maria Soledad, and everyone, my colleagues, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to say some closing remarks. And again, a great abrazo of congratulatory for your congratulatory efforts. That has been fantastic. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your permanent support, your professional permanent support, and always your personal kindness also. Special Envoy, we would like to hear from you your final words, please.
Muchas gracias, Paula. En primer lugar, decir que nos complace enormemente que el embajador Skornik de Chile haya estado acá con nosotros. Eso para nosotros tiene un gran valor y lo felicitamos por estar siempre comprometido con la causa de las personas con discapacidad. Por supuesto, y vuelvo a reiterar, al embajador Akram, al embajador Espinosa, que estuvieron con nosotros acá. Y yo quisiera contarles que es muy bonito el momento que se vive, aún con las dificultades de la pandemia, ¿no es cierto? Pero siempre hay cosas positivas. Y entre ellas está, por ejemplo, el trabajo mancomunado que hacemos en relacionarnos, por ejemplo, con el Comité sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad. Acá tenemos a la relatora del comité de la convención, la señora Amalia Gamio. Y quiero destacar el trabajo con la Unión Internacional de Ciudades y Gobiernos Locales, por ese genuino compromiso con la accesibilidad. Y a mí me parece, la señora Emilia Sáez lo ha demostrado incansablemente, y su grupo, Federico Poitier también, a quien doy un especial saludo. Sid Torcuato con las prácticas, las mejores prácticas de las ciudades accesibles, las ciudades para todos. Y también nuestro amigo Víctor Pineda, con World Enable, Cities for All, en que vamos todos de la mano trabajando hacia un mismo lugar. También tenemos a Haynes Laurelius de la Unión Mundial de Ciegos. En general, las personas no tienden a relacionar tanto la accesibilidad con personas ciegas o con personas con otras discapacidades, como la sordera, la sordoceguera, discapacidades intelectuales que requieren formatos aumentativos o alternativos de comunicación, o la discapacidad psicosocial también. No nos olvidamos de nadie aquí en este momento. Y por lo mismo, lo gratificante es, y eso es lo que sacaba yo en conclusión en pandemia, primero, que las personas con discapacidad han estado unidas para levantar su voz, por ejemplo, cuando se trató de hablar del derecho a la vida, de cuán importante era no ser dejados atrás para el cuidado intensivo, los respiradores mecánicos, etc. En segundo lugar, el interés también totalmente genuino de participar en la respuesta inclusiva y participativa a la pandemia COVID-19, como lo ha solicitado y lo ha recalcado el secretario general de las Naciones Unidas. Yo creo que allí las personas con discapacidad y sus organizaciones representativas han dado un ejemplo. Y también los gobiernos locales que por supuesto requieren el apoyo de los gobiernos centrales, ¿no?, para estas implementaciones. Pero gobiernos locales han ejercido un liderazgo muy importante porque son el engranaje que está entre el poder central y el individuo, el habitante, el ciudadano. Y por eso consideramos tan importante ese nexo. Y decirles que, por supuesto, todo con consulta estrecha, la sociedad civil de personas con discapacidad, aquí está representante de la Unión Mundial de Ciegos, pero también de consorcios bastante más amplios de sociedad civil. Entonces, la buena nueva es que sí, las personas con discapacidad estamos participando, las organizaciones representativas están participando con toda esa facilitación que están dando gobiernos locales y otras entidades de otras partes interesadas, y los gobiernos, desde luego, cada día más impulsar al apoyo efectivo para esta accesibilidad, que es sin duda, y me atrevo a decirlo, sin duda, lo que nos va a dar la clave para cumplir un decenio para el desarrollo sostenible, inclusivo para y con las personas con discapacidad y con todas las personas. Así que bueno, yo me despido aquí agradeciendo a todas, a todos, y Paula, te dejo para
Thank you very much, María Soledad. Thank you, Special Envoy. We are definitely amazed with this campaign on universal accessibility as a pillar and a bridge for human rights and sustainable development, and also the contributions made today by each one of the speakers. Thank you very much. Our mission is together. That is leaving no one and no place behind. I would like to remind you that this campaign material is going to be available for use in national and local contexts, free of charge. To download the material, you have to access the Special Envoys page, which is in UNDESA website. The recording of this event will also be shared through the UNTV website. Finally, we will show again the video for the farewell. Thank you very much to everyone. Bye-bye.
Accessibility, Pillar and Bridge, for the exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, United Nations. Persons with disabilities represent around 15% of the world's population, which is equivalent to more than 1 billion persons, who face several barriers to their full and effective inclusion in society. Persons with disabilities have the right to be autonomous, to live independently, and to be included in the community. Therefore, we must promote universal accessibility as a human right, so that our cities are inclusive, safe, resilient, progressing towards sustainable development, leaving no one behind. 2030 Agenda, United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, number 11. To improve accessibility in both urban and rural areas, we must apply principles, guidelines, and standards on universal design in all facilities and services open to the public or for public use, including the removal of obstacles and barriers. Implement or improve accessibility in physical spaces, such as buildings, public roads, transportation, schools, housing, hospitals or medical facilities, workplaces, stadiums, cultural centers, recreation and sports, among others. Promote access to information and communication services, including those needed in situations of emergency. Promote access and use for persons with disabilities to new information and communication technologies and systems, including the Internet. Buildings and other facilities must include accessible signage. Different forms of personalized assistance, such as guides, readers, and professional sign language interpreters, should be offered to facilitate accessibility to buildings and other facilities open to the public. Provide training, including training in universal design and accessibility to all public and private institutions that provide services to the public as well as to the community. We all must be aware that we live in diverse, dynamic, and interactive societies, and that the commitment of governments, including local governments and municipalities, is essential to ensure that accessibility is a fundamental pillar in all cities, creating a bridge so that all persons can enjoy all their human rights and fundamental freedoms. Let's promote accessibility as a commitment for society as a whole. Produced by the Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, María Soledad Cisternas Reyes. Year 2020.